Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Lee Felton, and you are in the right place. If you are coming here to attend the event, AI as Environment, hosted by the AI for Job Security Foundation. But before I get into all of the greatness I hope that you're going to experience tonight, I would like to start out with a question, something that is real, something that is tangible. I would like for everyone that is there, wherever you're from, I want you to just take a moment and think about something that didn't go your way. And you couldn't fully explain why. Maybe it was a job you applied for, maybe it was another promotion that you knew you were qualified for, you knew it was going to happen, but something just didn't add up. It went somewhere else. The explanation didn't make sense. Maybe you've tried to grow your business, you've tried to grow your voice, your visibility, and no matter how much effort you put into it, it just doesn't seem to move. Maybe it was a loan, an opportunity, a door that never opened, and you never were told why. And if you're honest, you probably had that moment where you just sat with it and you wondered, what am I missing? What am I not seeing? What's wrong with me? What is actually deciding this? Just sit with that for a second, because here is what I'm going to tell you tonight. That experience, it wasn't as random as it might have felt, and it wasn't just bad luck. Most of the time, it was a person, a hiring manager, a leader, a lender, someone making a call and using their judgment. Sometimes that judgment was made thoughtful. Sometimes it was rushed. Sometimes it was influenced by things that the person didn't even realize was influencing them. And sometimes it was simply them trusting their gut. And that gut can be right in a moment, but it can also be very wrong. But here's the shift. That same pattern of judgment, those same instincts, those preferences, those past decisions, they're now being captured, learned from, and built into systems. Not to make one decision, but millions, quietly at scale. Not pausing to consider whether its outputs were based on gut, on partial truths, just accepting, not questioning, not even making judgments, but just accepting what the data is as validity and truth. So what used to be one person's call, one moment, one bias, one interpretation of a person's potential, that now has become a filter. And that filter decides what version of the truth you get to see in the output and what inferences about you is determined between those filters, which ones are filtered out and which ones are never seen. And that's the difference. Before, you could question the decision, maybe even ask context as to why you didn't get a job or why you didn't get a promotion. Now that decision as an output, you have to just take it at face value. And that is why this moment matters so much, because we're moving from a world where decisions were made to a world where decisions are now shaped and automated before they're ever visible to a human. And the way we've been thinking about AI, it doesn't account for this shift. For decades, we've treated AI like a tool. A tool you can pick up, you can put down, you can put on, you can use it. A tool does what you direct it to do, and it stops when you stop directing it. That framing was never fully accurate, but it was close enough that we could build around it. It is not close enough anymore. What we're operating inside today at scale, in real time, across every domain represented in this virtual room, it's not a tool, it's an environment. And that's not just a metaphor, it's a complete ontological category shift in how we classify AI. And getting that classification right, that's the difference between governance that works and governance that allows significant societal harm. So tonight, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean, why it matters to everything about how AI touches your life, and what the governance architecture looks like when we get the classification right. So let's go. Okay, so what am I even talking about? What makes AI an environment and not a tool? There are actually 3 conditions, and these conditions are very observable. These are things that you can see happening in your organizations, in your industry, in your life right now. The first condition, saturation. A tool has a boundary. You use it or you don't. You pick it up or you leave it on the table. The choice is yours. When AI operates at saturation scale, it's embedded in hiring, in lending, in healthcare, in content distribution, in opportunities that get surfaced, who they get surfaced to, and then how those who don't get surfaced, how they're scored, how they can or cannot opt in or opt out. That all is gone, not practically gone. It's structurally gone. You don't have a choice. You didn't choose to use AI to apply for a job through an applicant tracking system. The AI is behind the scenes, invisibly evaluating you. Even when recommendations you get from your GPT feeds make you feel, oh my gosh, it knows me, it understands me. It's actually making inferences about you, the way you asked a question, exactly what you asked, in the specific words that you asked. Every single thing that you put into that question is being taken and it's being evaluated, and then inferences specifically about you that are invisible to you as to why you're getting an answer, that is shaping exactly what appears before you in that output in the first place. The boundary between tool and user has completely collapsed. And when that boundary collapses, every accountability, every question that we used to be able to ask, now we have to rewrite it because it's all different now. The second, co-adaptation. A tool doesn't change because you used it. A hammer, it doesn't learn your grip. A spreadsheet didn't just adjust to its logic based on whatever you typed last month. AI systems do at scale. They learn from aggregate behavior. They surface that learning as outputs. And humans, individually, get collected. They have to adjust. We don't just write our resumes differently, right? If you think about this new world, we write them for a system, and we think about what keywords are going to score higher. We have SEO experts. We have prompt engineers, people that know how to put in an exact prompt into an AI system, because we are looking for a way to get the best answer possible. So we're adapting. And before we ever write anything for another person, right now we're going through and we're looking at that AI, and we're trusting that AI to create everything that we know through algorithms. They're watching the market, and we're trying to look at how we're looking at a model and how it's scoring to reach as much and as broad as possible. That's not a tool. That's co-adaptation, which produces a fundamentally different kind of accountability problem, because harm, it's no longer traceable to a single decision point. It's distributed across adaptive loops, across loops that people never even knew they were inside of. And then third, condition number 3 is persistence. A tool ends when you put it down. An environment doesn't. So let's make that real for a second. You search for something, and I'm sure many of you have had that experience. You've searched for something once on the internet. Now it follows you across platforms, across devices, across days, not because you chose it, but because the system remembered. You search for a car, for a certain type of food. And how many of you are no longer surprised when all of a sudden in your feeds, you're getting those same products that you've been searching for? That decision doesn't just stay in one place, it travels. It shows up again and again in another form and in another system. Now it's in your email. Maybe your chatbot is even giving you additional suggestions that you had asked for days ago, and it's not supposed to have memory. That's persistence. When AI shapes the information you see, the opportunities that are surfaced for you, the risk scores that follow you across institutions, those inferences about you, those precede you ever entering a room. And that enables us to live inside a system that is persistent, that is cumulative, and that effects you don't even get to see. And those outputs, they compound over time. And it's persistence that makes this urgent right now, because we're not governing a tool. We're living inside an environment, then that mismatch between the two things, that's where most of the harm is happening. And that's where governance is failing. So those three conditions: saturation, coadaptation, persistence. These are not edge cases. This is the reality of what we're operating in today within AI. Because once you see it and once you understand it, it's very difficult to unsee that. So let me give you a story of something that you might be able to really relate with. Imagine two organizations, and so this has actually happened, but I'm going to paraphrase it. Imagine two organizations, two totally different leadership teams, two different companies, same industry. They decide to get serious about AI. So they each take what they believe is a disciplined approach. They gather all of the internal data, all of the information that they possibly can, performance metrics, strategy decks, market position, customer insights, all of that information, and they want a straightforward answer to a question. Where do we stand? Where do we stand in the market, and how do we win? And with each one of those prompts, the AI output is feeding it back all of this great information that sounds so structured, that sounds so confident. Each company, though, is told that they have the strongest position in the market. Each is given a very clear narrative of why they're ahead. Each company is being shown how their features, how their systems are awesome and above anything else that exists, and also given just enough information to challenge some areas. Not enough to make you doubt what you're being told, but just enough to challenge whether or not you're perfect. But guess what? These two organizations, they're getting told the same thing, and neither can be that perfect. Neither, in a competitive market where you're going head to head, neither of them has the exact same analysis and output, but yet AI has them convinced that their tool, that their product, that their output is the best, because that is what it is trained to do. It is trained to keep you engaged. It is trained to sound probabilistic. It's trained to sound like it is accurate and can be right. But nobody ever verifies the data and the information that are going through these systems. It's so persuasive that we just believe it. We accept it as truth. We stop asking, well, how did you come up with that? How do you know that this is great? How many times have you heard that? This is great. Oh, what an amazing question. No, you're right about that. Oh, that really is insightful. How does an AI system know that something is great or even good? So the next time your AI, your GPT tells you that's really good, ask it, what makes it good? Truly, that difference matters, because once a system can produce a convincing explanation, the burden is going to shift. It's no longer your requirement to ask, oh, this is great, is it true? What you ask yourself and what you have to ask the system is, do you believe this? And most organizations, most people, they don't realize that this shift is even happening. And so we have to take the responsibility to really pause and ask, what is it saying and how did it come to those conclusions? And I do want to pause for another minute, because I know I jumped right in. I have a lot of content to get through, and so I kicked things off really quickly. But I do want to pause, because if you know me, you would know that my history, my experience comes from the world of technology, especially the earlier days of AI and ethical AI. And what I'm not here to tell you is that these systems have to go. That is not what I'm here to tell you at all. And in fact, it's the opposite. I am here to help you understand how to embrace AI, These systems are truly remarkable. I mean, genuinely. The ability to generate and synthesize, to produce in seconds what used to take us days, weeks. It is truly amazing. And I understand why people love them. Heck, I love them. It feels like a superpower. So I'm not here to tell you that these systems are bad, but I am here to tell you something more important than that. They are great. They're great because of us. And that's the key that you need to remember. Every output a generative AI produces, it's built on human language, human creativity, human judgment, human experience. The system didn't invent intelligence. It learned to reflect ours back to us at scale. And that's exactly why what we do with it truly matters. Because when we stop pushing back, when we just accept those outputs as truth instead of as a starting point, the co-adaptation stops. The system's training then becomes the ceiling. And the ceiling is built from everything the data has already seen. Every CEO who was recognized as dictionary definition of what a CEO looks like, every leader who fit a defined template, every definition of potential that the historical record had already validated, that is what these systems are mimicking, which means the future gets limited to what the past already knew. Think about that for a moment. What is that going to cost us? I love to take into consideration Gen Zers. And I can't say I understand Gen Zers all that much. They have a completely different, novel approach to things from back in my day. But think about the Gen Z leader whose emotional intelligence and creativity doesn't match the traditional executive profile and now is being filtered out. Think about the unconventional thinker whose approach has no historical data point. It's filtered out as an edge case. The person whose potential exists entirely in what they will become, that never gets surfaced because the training data has never seen anyone like them succeed. We're not just talking about fairness. We're talking about ideas that people will never have. We're talking about the leaders that we will never develop, the problems we will never solve because the system decided who was worth seeing based on what it had already seen. And if we think the past is the only lens through which we can see the future, we're not innovating. We're just automating what we already believed. The opportunity, the real opportunity, is the co-adaptive loop working to give it meaningful potential. That's human, that's system, and that's pushing back. That's adapting. It's creating things that neither could produce alone. But that only happens when we understand what we're actually inside. And right now, most of us don't. So let me give you the term. Let me break it down because it is a mouthful. I know. It is a complete mouthful. So I want to break down the term, to understand why I've called it this co-adaptive anthropotechnical environment. And so really easily, it is 3 words. So if you take the 3 words and the 3 ideas separately, we'll start with co-adaptive. The adaptation runs in both directions. You're not just using the system is shaping you. So every prompt you send, every correction you make, every pattern of engagement that you're bringing to these systems, it's learning from it. And you, whether you realize it or not, you're adjusting to what the system makes easy, makes visible, makes possible. That is no longer a user and a tool. That's 2 parties continuously changing each other. The next word, anthropotechnical. So we'll break that word apart. Anthropo, that means human. Technical means system, machines, infrastructure. So if you put it together, it means you have systems that are built from human behavior, but they run through technology. They're not human. They don't have independent thinking, but they're not independent of humans either. It is having decisions on us. It's taking history. It's turning it into something that can operate on its own. And it's taken a defined template for what it means to be human without challenging whether or not that is the right definition or not. And then the third word, environment. This is the shift that most people miss. In other fields, environment is already a defined category of governance. So in finance, insider trading laws address unequal access and playing fields. Financial protections govern how information and technology are used. Think about healthcare. Oversight bodies and review boards require tracking of health conditions and outcomes, even mortality rates, not just the treatment itself. In safety, you have things like OSHA requirements. Employers have to manage workplace safety conditions and exposure. They don't just happen to report it after the incident is done, after the harm has already occurred. That is the shift here. AI is not just producing outputs. It's creating the conditions that influences lives and livelihoods without any of us seeing or knowing why. That is what a co-adaptive, anthropotechnical environment is. The governance problem is this. If you treat AI like a tool, you end up evaluating outputs as isolated incidents, as one-offs. Something that you can review, that you can correct, that you can apply a patch to, and then move on. But if you recognize it as an environment, you have to evaluate something entirely different. You have to analyze its influence over time. So what patterns are being reinforced without us being able to see how those decisions came about? We already know how to govern environments. When the impact is very clear, we already regulate things like pollution, public health exposure, safety risk, because we understand that harm, it's not in one single event. It accumulates, it concentrates, and it shapes outcomes across entire communities. And AI, it's operating in that same way. So let me be direct about what that means for each of you specifically right now. For the organizations deploying AI at speed, believe me, I know you don't want to slow down. You don't want to be of the past. You want to stay, ahead of the game. And you're embedding these decision-making layers into your organizations. Just know this is what your people will learn from. This is what is going to shape their behavior, and it is going to produce outcomes that you did not explicitly program. And here's the problem. When something goes wrong, it will go wrong. But when it goes wrong at scale, you're going to look and you're going to try to find, where did it happen? Who was affected? What was the specific output? What was that identifiable moment? Who was the person that approved it? And you're not going to find a clean answer, because the harm, it didn't come from one place. It came from thousands of small shaping moments that accumulated over time. And this happens with even the simplest of systems. Before a resume is even reviewed, a system decided who was worth seeing in the first place. So it's not just that, oh, there's a human in the loop, I get to take these resumes and then I get to choose. That you even have machines deciding who's not even worth considering is something that you have to take in advantage. That's something that you have to take into consideration. You didn't make the calls, but they're happening inside your organizations. They're happening under your brands and on your watch. And if nothing else, if you want to move fast, you want to move efficient, you want to downsize, you want to move now, if nothing else, the business case for getting the classification right is not about you slowing down. It's about knowing what you're actually deploying before the liability finds you. Now, for government and policy leaders, and I hear this one constantly, we can't regulate what we don't understand. These systems are moving too fast. The technology is too complex. By the time we write the rule, it's already obsolete. And that's a real problem. But I want you to consider something else. Do you always have to understand something in order to make the rule, in order to govern it? Do you have to understand how an engine works to require that a car has brakes? You don't need to know how a factory works before you demand safety protocols in place. What you need to understand is what the system is doing to the world and to certain communities. And right now, those systems are being deployed in mass markets. They're making decisions about who gets housing, who gets credit, who gets seen by an employer, who gets flagged by law enforcement. Even if there's a human in the loop, as they say, an environment still shapes what those humans ever see in the first place. The regulatory gap, it's not technical. It's a classification problem, and the rules were written for tools while we're operating in environments. And for those amazing engineers and organizations that are building and deploying AI, you are doing an amazing job. And I think most of us would say we're awe-inspired by the progress that has been made in the last couple of years. And we're seeing more and more and more that you're doing bias audits, you're doing fairness testing, there's explainability documentation, there's frameworks in place that really helps you try to show where you pushed, where you questioned. But the question you need to sit with is that a model can actually pass every fairness test that you put in front of it. It can pass every single one in isolation, and it can still exclude the same people over and over and over, because the harm is not going to be measured in a single output. It's these patterns that the world interacts with, and it's these patterns that accumulate. So if you test a tool and you test an individual output, that is not showing you really what the environment is doing and shaping. Who actually is going to be harmed? Who actually, are you putting those risks on? And it's not that you're bad actors. It's not that organizations, just want to make profit, which is huge, but they want to bring good to the world too. But good has to be taken into consideration of what it actually is. And let's talk about individuals, the real people who are navigating this moment. And I know what many of you are feeling. There is an awe, and at the same time, there's a fear about what am I going to do about my next job? What about my college graduate who's trying to get their first job? And for too many people, a deeper question that's sitting underneath all of it is, what does this mean about long-term employability? And the fear sounds like this: AI is good, but is it better than me? Is it smarter than me? Is it going to replace me? And I would argue that fear is real, but for it to become true, we have to just continue down the current path that we're on. If we keep assuming that when people are removed, the system is just going to operate, and that it's neutral, that it's right, that it delivers truth because it knows so much, then yes, it absolutely can replace us. But here's where that breaks. When AI produces a result, a ranking, a shortlist, a recommendation, even if it looks complete, even if it looks confident, if the answer looks like, gosh, that sounds really good. When your name isn't there, or when you're not selected, just because something sounds good, that does not mean that you can't question it. That doesn't mean that it actually is the right answer, because these are probabilistic systems. They are literally guessing. I know that sounds off the wall, but they are literally guessing. They're taking, I'm not going to get into the semantics of it, but they're taking little tokens and they're saying, okay, what is the most likely next thing that should come after this token? And they're guessing. So they can come off very confident and have absolutely no idea what it's actually telling you. And that's the fallacy, because the system, it didn't make a judgment about you. It didn't evaluate the truth of your capability. It's not weighing every success, every single output, every layer of who you are into that pattern to produce the output. That's not how it does. What it does is exactly what it's been trained on. It's been trained to recognize past patterns, past hires, past definitions of who looked right, who sounded right, who was considered ready. So the output, it's not a measure of your potential. It's a reflection of what the system already knows of what they already saw. And AI is not just producing outputs, it's shaping decisions. And anything that shapes decisions is shaping outcomes for you. It's shaping outcomes around you. And most of the time, it's shaping those outcomes without you even knowing it. And here's the part that most people didn't realize. When something starts shaping decisions like that, it's no longer neutral. It's no longer just helping. It's participating. And once something is participating, it's already part of how outcomes are being decided, whether anyone formally called it that or not. And the accountability mechanisms, they're becoming harder and harder to see. That there are even harm occurring. Sometimes you can't even see that on the surface. And that is what people mean when they say governance. Governance is not about policy, it's not about paperwork, it's about control. Who or what is influencing decisions, and whether you can see it, whether you can question it, whether you can challenge it. Because right now, most people are inside of these systems and it's making inferences about them without them even knowing that this is happening. And the systems don't have to disclose what inferences that it's making. So take a position, a person applies for a job, a very strong candidate. The experience lines up, the skills are there, the track record is there. But there's a gap, there's time off. What the system didn't see is there was taken time off to have children, time to care for family, time that in a human conversation, a hiring manager could have asked about it. But within a generative AI system, in that same profile into an AI-driven process, that system didn't ask the questions. It just compared the patterns. And what has it seen? Well, fewer executives have these gaps. Fewer CEOs have stepped away and then returned after a while. There's fewer successful profiles that included these pauses, even when those pauses had nothing to do with capability. So what happens? That profile is scored lower, not because that person is less capable, but because they look less like what the system has learned to recognize as success. And if you think that's interesting, who do you think, based on that scenario alone, who is going to be impacted the most? If a woman's taken time off to have a child, that lag is not going to be seen as, as strong in her resume as someone who didn't take that gap. So we are influencing, we are having influences to systems that are touching every aspect of our lives. And the real question is, if it's disproportionately impacting women or caregivers, anyone whose path doesn't follow this continuous, uninterrupted line, where do we stop to make sure that those amazing, qualified, potentially even perfect candidates, that they're not getting passed by? And if you take nothing else from tonight, please take away this. If something is shaping decisions about you, you have the right to question it. You have the right to understand it, and you have the right to not accept it blindly. Because the question is not whether this is happening. You know it is. You're here. Even if you weren't here, like in this space right now, you're seeing it happen all around you. But the question is whether you're going to stay passive inside of it or start recognizing where you actually have the power. And that is going to be your big shift. I didn't come to this work from the outside. I helped to build it. Before most organizations had ethical AI frameworks and before responsible AI became a department or a title or a budget line, I was already in those rooms, not observing, not advising from a distance, actually building, constructing the frameworks, the champs and the ambassador models, the review boards. And even then, I pushed back. I didn't have the language, enough at that time. I didn't have enough of the understanding. I didn't have enough knowledge to know exactly where humanity, where everyday people, where they had control. But I continue to grow and to stretch and to push back. And that shift doesn't happen overnight. And I'm not finished. I'm still growing. Even the frameworks that I'm creating, those are still growing, because that's what co-adaptation actually means. It means challenging and pushing, and you're not arriving at a final answer. That you are just adjusting and understanding and learning more as you go. But there was something while I was doing all of that work, there was something I couldn't stop seeing. That most of the rooms that I sat in, there was a gap. And it was the people who were paying the price, the ones that are being harmed the most by the environments. Those are the people who weren't at the rooms. They weren't sitting at the tables. They didn't have a voice in the plan that decided what risks were acceptable and which harms would be tolerated. And that's what I mean when I start talking about harm externalization or quiet failures. The harms, they don't announce themselves. It's not always catastrophic or some big headline about an AI fail. It concentrates in rooms where people who are making these decisions every day, where they're not impacted as much. So I did something in my interactions during all of this time, during all of this work, during all of this research. I learned to correct it. I learned to force the system to reconcile where it's making inferences about me that doesn't match reality. And that is when something became very clear. The system, it's not fixed, it's not static, and it's not neutral. It adapts, not just to data, but it adapts to you. Because most people, this is what they do. They ask a question, they receive an input, they accept the input. The end. And if that's how you're interacting with your AI, the systems are learning from that. But what happens when you don't interact that way? When you push back, when you say, that inference is wrong, that narrative is incomplete, that output, it doesn't reflect my truth, and I'm not just going to correct you. I'm not going to just accept it, but I am going to let you know, why did you give me that answer? What does that mean? You're helping to shape what these systems learn next. That's not a feature, that's a relationship. And that relationship is important for you to know your own brilliance, your own genius. And once you see it that way, you realize something people miss. It's not just that AI is shaping you, but you're shaping it too. But only if you engage it in that way. And that is why I wrote the book. Not to explain AI, not to add another voice to a conversation that already has too many voices and not enough structure, but rather to document what happens when you actually engage with it at a conversational level. When you stop accepting the output and start questioning the inferences, when you stop fitting the pattern, but rather start breaking it. Because here's what I know. Right now, there are some people who will learn how to engage AI in this way. They will question it. You get an output. Oh, great job. Why did you just tell me great job? And I know it sounds condescending. It's like, why are you asking it? Just accept the compliment. But that's what I'm trying to tell you. It's not a compliment. If it's telling you great job, it's because somewhere in the algorithm, it's made to believe that you will stay engaged if it makes you feel like you're doing a great job. So that's why you question it. You don't just accept it at face values. And those are the people, when you talk about who will be well-positioned in the future, those are the ones who will be seen. Those are the people who are going to be surfaced, and those are the people who are going to be heard. The others won't even know what's happening to them. And that gap between people who know how to engage with AI and people who don't, that's what I care about. It's not about fear. It's not about frameworks just for framework's sake, but rather it's about access. It's about the ability for every person not just the ones who are already in the rooms that understand how this works, but it's time for every person who's going to be impacted by this to shape what these systems are actually learning from them. So tonight, I mentioned it, it's not just a book launch, but it's also an invitation. It's an invitation to be part of what gets built next. And I told you that I wanted to explain what you're being invited to with the launch of I Could Have Been CEO Yesterday. And I guess I want to be clear, this title is not about regret, and it's not about the past. It's about the future. And it's about what does the system says give us credibility for who will be CEO tomorrow. Who's going to get filtered out before anyone decides? And when that happens, when people realize that you are the key ingredient to making these systems work, now that is when we will see a true fundamental shift. So volume 1 documents what that looks like from the inside, not as a theory, but as research, as a lived signal, the masking, the overperformance. Think about things that you've gone through that these systems are taking at face value to say, yes, this is how a professional person looks, how they act. How much of that is masking, is performance, is weighing on you, right? But that's not actually what built your brilliance, your genius, what made you succeed. That is what the system's not seeing. It's just seeing the show that you had to put on in order to get where you thought you had to go. And all of this is being written from the vantage point of how do we make sure that we don't just take what AI gives you at face value. And it's the moment you realize the system was never built to see you fully and that you've been adapting to it in ways that you didn't even know, that is where you start to take control of the room. And then we get to volume 2, which goes a little bit further, and it helps to formalize everything that I've been building towards tonight around the co-adaptive anthropotechnical environment, the full framework, the governance architecture, some case evidence that shows you the classification error and how it moves across time from being a tool to when that adaptation starts happening and when you can actually see the moment that has changed. And so I hope you enjoy that because it's written from the vantage point of a person who lived inside of this. And I am happy to say that both volumes are available. I will try to put the link in the chat. I also want to talk briefly about the AI for Job Security Foundation, and very excited to be part of that foundation, which exists really to make sure that the knowledge that I just spent the last hour sharing with you, that it doesn't just stay in rooms with people who know this, that it is spreading, that it is contagious, that it is becoming knowledge across the environments and societies where people can take great advantage and control of their talent to use and shape these systems. Because without that language to know what's happening, things are just going to happen to them. They need to have and be equipped with the information to be able to push back. And so that is why we exist, to provide community education, awareness, empowerment, and to have a replicable model where real communities and real conversations are happening. And also, I want to thank my board who is tuning in tonight, all of my great board who has done such an amazing job at coming together and building the foundation and all of the amazing tools that we are getting out to communities. I just want to take a moment to thank and appreciate each one of you. And if you are an organization or a university or a community, let us know if there's something that we can bring to your community to make sure that the people who matter most are equipped with the knowledge and the know-how to actually engage in these systems the right way. Because AI is not coming. AI is here, and it's already inside the systems that you're using every day. It's already shaping what you see. It's already shaping what you're offered, and it's deciding things about you before you even had a chance to respond. That's not a warning. That's a fact. So here's the question that actually matters now. Not how do we slow it down? And it's not going to be how do we stop it? It's how do each one of us show up inside of it as fully complex, irreplaceable humans. And that is the brilliance that we bring. Because here's what I know. A probabilistic engine, no matter how fast, no matter how vast, no matter how confident it sounds, it's not smarter than you. It's trained on what already happened. It knows the past. You're living in the future. And the future, your future, it's never existed in any other data set. It's never been seen. It's never been scored, and it's never been predicted. It's yours. So when the system tells you what you're worth, question it. When it tells you that you fit a profile or that you don't fit a profile, push back. When it builds a ceiling out of someone else's history, refuse it. Not because the system's evil, but simply because it's incomplete. And it's incomplete systems that are learning from us, that are learning from what we give them. So let it accept what you're teaching it. Let it accept that you will challenge it and that you won't just take what it's giving you at face value, that you won't shrink to become what it sees in you. And your perspective, your experience, your way of seeing the world that no training data has ever captured, you are the part that's missing in this new era, because we cannot be replaced. And that is not, just an era of fear of co-adaption, but it's an era where the systems that we're using do not define how we show up, but they adapt to who we are, who we genuinely, naturally are, and we leverage them from that vantage point. You're not part of a pattern. You're here to break it. You're not your data. You're not an inference. You're the thing the system hasn't learned to see yet, because the future is still being written. And if we let AI decide who will be CEO tomorrow based on who was CEO yesterday, that is not innovation. That is rinse and repeat. So with that, I want to just take a moment, because I do have some questions that have come through. So I do want to take a moment and go through the questions, and I appreciate everybody who has taken the time to sign in and join us tonight. So one of the things that, let's see, Jackie says, this shift towards partnering with AI is such an important one. What I'm seeing is that while many leaders understand they should challenge and engage with AI, far fewer have developed the thinking pattern to do that effectively in real-time decision-making. I would wholly agree with that, Jackie. And this is exactly what we're seeing and what you've probably experienced. Exactly what I said. People think AI is so smart. You will hear that question all the time. Gosh, is AI more intelligent than people, more intelligent than humans? And it's the wrong question. And I'm not just saying that because, I think humans are so great, but I do think humans are so great. I don't think humans can be replaced, but it's beyond that. If you truly think about what AI is, it's a statistical engine. So it is saying, what is the best thing that is going to get the result based on what my training said is success? So if engagement is what the model has been trained to say success, so the longer you engage with it, the longer you interact with it, if the model thinks that's what success is, then it's going to tell you anything that's going to make you feel like, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm going to continue to use it. But we can use it differently than that. We don't need it to stroke our egos. We need it to help us. We don't need it to think for us. We need it to collaborate with us. And so it is something that I would urge everybody participating tonight to do that one test. The next time your AI says you did something great, or that was a really good question, I encourage each of you to push back and just ask it, what did you mean by that? Why was that a good question? What made that particular answer or that particular response so great? And I think you might start having a different dynamic in engagement and interaction with your own systems when you start pushing back and start really holding it to what you need it to deliver. You're writing a paper about something, don't just take the paper and let it tell you this is the paper you need to, this is what you need to write, this is how you need to write it. Really push back and say, you know what, that doesn't sound like me. And why doesn't it sound like me? Because it sounds like, like some random, content that you just pulled. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, start just challenging it, because the dynamic of the relationship and how you engage, it will change. And the AI on the other side of that will change as well. And it will start to pause and say, okay, I can't just throw at, this person, the regular stuff that I've been throwing, that I'm gonna have to think about it differently. And it happens like that. So now I want to take a quick pause, because I do have one of my board members here with me, and I want to bring her up to the platform. Come on, Keisha. Hello, everybody.
Good day.
This is Keisha Walker. Say hello. I have this new camera.
Good day, everyone.
And so Keisha, you've been watching the full show and the chat, and I know it goes on and on and on. There's so much. I get so excited about this, and there's so much to say about it. I know you can only say so much at one time, but what was your takeaway? What did you think about some of the content that was covered tonight?
I think it's insightful. It's definitely also something that's needed. So many people have a fear of AI for different reasons. A lot of it is just, I think, just a lack of understanding. And the opportunity now is to dive in, be open and willing to see how it can benefit you. There is a lot of cost savings, time savings, but as Lee elegantly mentioned, you can never replace humans, and you will always need humans to manage the success of AI and how it can add value to what you're doing, whether you're a nonprofit, an entrepreneur, you're doing consulting work, or you're working at a corporation. So figure out a way to leverage it and tweak it so it works best for you. And you eloquently showed them how to do that. I'm so excited about the book, and
well, thank you.
Being on the board.
Oh, thank you so much. Was there anything else? Like I said, I wasn't able to fully monitor the chat window. Was there anything else that came up? Okay, so we got one question.
Yeah, a lot of congratulations.
Yeah, a lot of congratulations. So we got one question, and it is, what does it actually mean to have AI governed as an environment, not a tool? And I can't get into the full depth. A lot of that is in the book, but if you think about the things that we govern as environments, so anything that is going to have drastic impacts on parts of society. So you think about healthcare. So healthcare, a lot of regulated industries, finance, things that have drastic impacts that you can't wait until the harm has already happened to say, oh, we need to put governance in place, that these are things that you have to get to ahead of time, because it will disproportionately impact large portions of the population. And so, that's how we do it. We look at things that are already being governed as environments. We look at safety protocols through manufacturing. We look at healthcare and how we are governing and regulating healthcare. Financial industries are heavily regulated. But I have been, and this surprised me, I think more than anything, I have been in rooms where just some random organization, someone says, oh, I was at a conference and this guy, sold me this AI thing that I'm going to try it in our organization. And people don't have any kind of protocols or anything in place. And people are just able to, if you have to buy it and say, okay, I'm going to hook it up to your network.
Yes. And that's to me, it's been a very interesting process, and trying to understand. I went to a conference, same thing. They were like, well, do you want to sign up to be able to get training and to come out with a certification in 2 days? And I'm like, that sounds scary. The fact that somebody can sell you a certification in 2 days, and then that you can use that and help leverage it within your whatever aspect of life work that you're doing. And so, being able to vet that I'm glad you're here to help us provide clearinghouse screenings, especially with your background and the amount of time work you've been doing on this, because you're not new to this. And I think there's a lot of people out there selling these hopeful dreams and training and understanding and and just being able to understand and make sense of the who and the why.
Now that right there, that is a great point. Just because someone tells you something, how great something is, doesn't mean that it is so, and doesn't mean you should just take it and accept it. And I like to use this example. It's like, I always tell people, embrace AI.
Absolutely.
I truly believe you should embrace AI, but it's like anything else that you embrace. You don't just embrace and let anything close to you, without recognizing that whether there's harms, whether not recognizing that there are significant, damage or whatever that it can do. So you embrace things with caution. And so any organization that has an open policy where people can just try out AI, just know once the AI gets into your network, so unless you're working in sandbox systems, closed environments, unless you're working in these sandbox systems, if you're allowing people to test on your network, it is actually getting into your network, into your data, into your information. So just kind of have something in place before you allow employees, or even before you do it yourself, start rolling out AI systems, because they can have tremendous impact long-term and huge consequences long-term if you don't know what you're doing or if you don't put parameters up front. So I hope this has been educational. We've gone long. I know we are at time, but I sincerely appreciate Keisha, the other people who are in the room, who is able to join us. Okay, do you have a recommendation of a place to get a credible certification or training on governance? And so I'm guessing, Jen, that you're speaking about AI governance. And this is a question that I have been asked, and it's an interesting question because I don't think a certificate, or I don't think necessarily that a certificate or this stamp that says that, you took this class, that means you know what you're doing. I think that they're, depending on what you're looking at, looking at getting governance for. So for instance, if you are creating a governance body at your organization, at least the very first place that I tell people is at least to understand your values. And so without having aligned values for your organization to say, this is what we stand for, these are our values, and you have to question and push, is the AI that you're bringing in, does it align to the values that you have established? Is it helping those values, or is it risking those values? And in terms of certifications, there's lots of programs now that offer certifications, just like there's, everybody's learning this real time. Everybody is learning. No, I don't think many of us expected this just mass deployment at a consumer level of these technologies. And so I would say this, just like with anything that you learn or get certified in, experience and practice, what do they say, 10,000 hours or more is what makes you an expert. A certification isn't necessarily going to be the thing that tells you how to put something in place. What is going to be the thing that how you put it in place is looking at the frameworks, understanding the impacts to people, and understanding impacts beyond how great, what the great feature is or use is for the AI, looking beyond what you perceive as benefits to who is it actually harming that we haven't considered. That to me matters more than a certificate. Yeah. Any other questions? I think we are good. It's been a long night. It is
very insightful, great information. Thank you.
Thank you, Keisha.
Always excited to support.
And it's really nice to have you here. I hope, as you know, like I said, we're doing our community events and we're gonna start offering more training programs. They're gonna be shorter than this, thank goodness. I just wanted to do this first highlight to kind of get people acclimated to what AI as an environment might be, and actually to help you understand that you have more control, more power than you think you do. You really do. So with that being said, I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your week. Enjoy and take care, everyone. Thank you.